Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our viewers from Fiji to Turkey of the Asia Pacific region and beyond. My name is Jose, and to our viewers, thank you very much for joining us today in our productivity talk organized by the Asian Productivity Organization. Today's P-Talk topic is Future Public Services. This P-Talk will primarily look into the design of future public services to adjust to our new reality, especially in addressing long-term recovery so that public sector can provide critical services, especially how COVID-19 pandemic has changed our lifestyle under the so-called new normal. In addition, the rapid transformation of the society and the digital revolution, along with budgetary constraints faced by the government, pose some challenges in providing public services in the future. In one article I read, examples of future public services, which may be already happening in some parts of the world, are digital justice as a video-enabled courtroom is one example, digital security policing based on online and mobile application with the police and the community people, digital patients with electronic transactions using apps and wearables in the health service. For sure, some of you already have this kind of wearable apps to check your health condition. Digital learning, I think this is happening almost throughout the world in many countries with more online classes in the education sector. And there are many others. But the questions remain. Will this increase citizen satisfaction? Will all citizens have same opportunity in accessing these services? Will it be effective and efficient? These are just some of the questions that we will address in this P-Talk. Joining us today to share his knowledge and expertise on the topic, we are pleased to have with us today Professor Myung Jae Moon, Director of Institute for Future Government, Yonsei University, Republic of Korea. He is also the Dean of the College of Social Sciences and an Underwood Distinguished Professor of the Department of Public Administration. Welcome, Professor Moon, and good afternoon. Would you like to say hello to our viewers?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jay Moon. Thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate the invitation to P-Talk.
Thank you very much for joining us in this P-Talk. So now we would like to invite Professor Moon for his short presentation. So we would like to encourage our viewers, if you have questions or comments to this P-Talk, please send them to the chat box corner of the YouTube. Now, Professor Moon, your presentation, please.
Well, thank you so much for your kind introduction. And today my topic is future public services. So I will talk a lot about future, but it's not just the future. Actually, we are going through the pandemic situations. There are a lot of things that we learn from the pandemic experiences. So I will talk a lot about some of the lessons that we get from the pandemic situations, and then future, which really focus on some of the technology applications for public services. Well, this is me, my area of research, basically ICT application in the public sector and public sector reform. And I was selected as one of the world's 100 most influential people in digital government by Apolitical, which is a London-based global nonprofit network. And then just for fun, on the right-hand side, there is one photo of mine, and they're with a lot of Koreans. And probably you know the BTS, one of the magazine actually selected me one of the next generation leader. I don't know why they chose me, but just for fun. Anyway, well, we are all going through pandemic COVID-19. And in fact, just like this, I do have my facial mask all the time. And all governments are going through and then under test. Some of the countries are pretty good, relatively speaking. Some of the countries are performing pretty poor. So now the question really comes to us, what are the things really we need to think about for future government and for future public services? And I think there are a lot we need to think about. Well, one thing is that the nature of the problems that we are solving is very different from the typical problems. That's what we call so-called wicked problems. Wicked problems is not simple problem. It's unstructured, cross boundary. So it's not just the public health issues, it's economy issues, it's education issues, it's a poverty issues. So it's a cross boundary, and then there are different solutions out there. Some of the people try to mitigate COVID-19. At the same time, some of the people really try to boost up economy. So there are broadly disagreements among different people and policymakers. And there are trade-offs, of course. There are multiple actors engaged. And then target has been changing all the time. For example, at the first time, we didn't know asymptomatic patients. And then later, there's more knowns. So that it's constantly changing. Now we have different variants, like a Delta variant. So wicked problems is complicated, uncertain, and complex. And the thing is that we will have more problems like this in future. So that's why that really put a lot of challenges to government. Well, let me borrow one quotation from Albright. She's the state secretary under Clinton administration. Once she said this: "We are taking 21st century challenges, evaluating them with the 20th century ideas, and responding with 19th century tools." Of course, there are mismatches. Problem is solved and challenges are new, and then the legal frameworks, and then some of the practices, that's a 20th century old one, and then some of the policy tools that we are using even older. So that the thing is that how we really align new problems, new ideas, and new tools so that we solve the problems and then enhance the quality of life for the people. Well, let me just emphasize the concept of agility. Probably many of you have heard about agile government, agile method, and agility. Strategic agility been emphasized by OECD, and basically there are three different things emphasized. One is strategic sensitivity, which means because of the rapidly changing environment, and there are something that government need to do in terms of being sensitive to a changing environment. So they're collecting data and then try to make decisions based on changing environment. So that strategic sensitivity is very, very critical to government. And then the other one is resource fluidity, which means more flexibility in using personnel, so human resources in the public sector, and then budget, financial resources, so that government is known for inflexibility. But in the future, because of the problems like COVID-19, we should respond not only very speedy, very quick, at the same time, reallocating resources in a proper way to deal with the new problems. So that resource fluidity, flexibility in resources, in organization, that's very, very critical. And then the other one is leadership unity. Because multiple actors should work together to solve the problems we are facing with, at the same time providing good services, not just by one agency, but working together and with a collaborative government. And that's why we need leadership unity, which really makes tough collective decision working with the many other actors. So here, strategic sensitivity, resource fluidity, leadership unity, those are something that we need to keep our mind. Let me go back to the concept of agility. Agility is not necessarily just speed. Here I show you three different photos. Well, we have now Olympic Games in Tokyo, and there are many sprinters running fast, but agility is not just running fast. Take a look at this one. Well, usually if you Google images, sprint training, and then you will see images like this. Some of the people practicing running fast, start very fast, and then, muscle strength, they try to gain, right? Those are some of the images that you can get if you type sprint training in Google. What about agility training? When you Google agility training images, and then you will see these types of images. Well, it's not just the running fast. There are some obstacles, so that sometimes you should change the directions, left to right, right to left. So, and it requires speed and flexibility, so that because of the constantly facing new obstacles, and then the players, they should change the directions in a flexible way. So agility is combination of flexibility and speed. I think that's some secrets how some of the successfully mitigating COVID-19. The way they have done is pretty much very agile approach, adaptive approach to changing environment, some of the new challenges by COVID-19. Well, of course, government is not designed to be agile. Government needs some stability. Suppose that one government is changing all the time, people will feel very uncomfortable because that government is very unstable. So I just want to share one study done by the Institute for Future Government. And left-hand side, that's the graph that we draw from the data we got last year. So we ask people, well, how anxious about COVID-19? And then x-axis is that how agile the government is. So that 1 to 5. So the 5 means, well, government is very agile, flexible, fast, and things like that. And then you have 3 different lines. The blue line is the group of people who don't have good trust in government. And then green line is the groups who have very good confidence and high level of trust in government. And then red line is sort of neutral in between. Now, last year we surveyed 1,000 people in Korea, and then take a look at this one, the left graph. Those people who have good trust in government, as they feel government is very agile, and then their anxiety on COVID-19 goes down. So that if they trust in government, and then governments are very agile, and then they feel very comfortable, and then their anxiety level goes down. But those groups who don't trust government, and then they think the government is very agile, flexible, move fast, and then their anxiety level goes up. Well, that was the last year story. So that if you have good trust in government, and then agile government, agility really help to reduce the level of anxiety of the people. And then right-hand side graph, basically exactly same question to the people, and then we collected the data this year. Regardless of the level of public trust in government, as they think government is very agile, and then their anxiety level goes up. So what does this tell us? Well, under very uncertain situations, last year, COVID-19 is new challenge, new problem, and then agility is very, very helpful, and then that really helped people to decrease their anxiety level. But if government is agile, changing all the time, well, now after 1 year, regardless of the public trust level in government, and then their anxiety level goes up. Well, high public trust, low public trust, it doesn't matter. So that government really has 2 things. One, well, we need stability, and then the other one, agility. This year, now we all pretty much experience COVID-19, and people really want stability now. When you have a new problem, agility really works good. Now, so government need to really balance between agility and then stability. And I think that's the key to deal with new problems, very challenging new issues that we are facing with. Now, another one I just want to draw your attention is one of the concept offered by Waldowski. He passed away. He is very famous public policy scholar, taught in Berkeley. And to him, he sort of proposed two main approaches. One is anticipation. If we predict future well, and then we can anticipate future problems, and then we take an action, and then we can avoid any problems. But of course, we know anticipation is very, very difficult. If that's the case, we should rely on resilience, so that trial and errors. So the two approaches, well, anticipation, trial without error, but it requires good prediction and forecast. And then we should know the problems, and we have good accumulated knowledge of public issues. Resilience, trial and error, and then risk-taking approaches. So we have two options. That's the case to any government in the world. Well, let me share one photo that I took right before COVID-19 was outbroken. I went to Denmark and Netherlands and some of the European countries to see how those countries really try to use artificial intelligence and new technologies for public services. And then the photo on the right-hand side, that's the photo that I took in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen, there are a lot of people ride on bike. And then I realized that some of the bike street is much wider than a automobile street. And then that if they want to widen bicycle street, and then they should give up some automobile street and road. And that's very tough decision, because there are, automobile drivers, they don't want, their, road, they don't want to give up their road, right? And then I asked the question, when you make that decisions, how do you make it? And then my friend pointed the right-hand side. That's how many bicycles passing every day, how many bicycles passing every year, so that they really try to monitor the data, and then whenever they make decisions, they make decisions based on evidence, based on fact, so that evidence-based decisions. I think that's very, very critical. And in fact, data and evidence will be really important one if we want to approach anticipation. Of course, still anticipation is very challenging. But Blue Dot Company on the left-hand side, that's the Canadian company which actually predicted COVID-19. Of course, they didn't name it COVID-19, but they analyzed the data, animal origins disease, and and also the people's movement, and some of the related data, and then they put the warning. There might be very serious infectious disease originated from animals. Well, Blue Dot Company actually tell us we can do better job in analyzing some of the data available, and then we can make some proactive and preventive actions so that we can minimize or avoid some of the problems like COVID-19 for future. Well, let me share another one here. When we have some problems, government cannot solve the problem by itself. And left-hand side is the when we had COVID-19 in Korea, and people really tried to buy facial mask. And then initially last year, there was short supply of facial mask. And then what happened was that, they want to know where they should go for facial mask purchasing. And then government offered the facial mask through the drugstores in Korea. That's part of the national public health systems. Anyway, they offered the data, and then group of citizens actually used the data and then made the app, mobile phone available apps, and then that's facial mask locator. So that here government provide the data, and then actually citizens actually design and made the mobile apps available to anybody in Korea. And the other one is, last year in May, Korean government decided to offer some emergency financial assistance to every household in Korea. And then think about if they want to offer the money, financial support to every household, which is more than 22 million households in Korea. And the payment is very, very challenging. If we want to use local government office, it will take a long time. But within 5 days, and most of the people got the financial support because they didn't work just through local government, but they worked with 8 card companies and then bank branches, so that citizens and household, they can visit, of course, local government office, or they can use their credit card so that they can just spend money with their credit cards or through their banks. So here, working together with the private sector and citizens is very, very key for future public services. Well, the remaining 10 minutes, I will spend some time to share how new technologies might be key to future public services. Well, of course, there are different kinds of disruptive technologies. Well, we have drones, 3D paintings, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. There are many technologies. Well, if you have a chance, probably you want to visit this website, Will Robots Take My Job? So that if you type your jobs, and then the share of replaced will be replaced by robots. For example, construction laborers, 88% will be replaced by automation and robots. What about accountings, auditors, 94%? Number calculation and following those rules, accounting rules, 94% will be automated. What about social and human services assistance? We have a lot in the public sector. In Japan, they use robots for some of the elderly care. Well, 13%. And people like me also interested in some of the public sector services, right? And firefighters, 17% will be replaced. And political scientists, 4%, and those people in education field, 4%. But I think COVID-19 really makes the scene changing, because now I think it's more than 4%. There are a lot of changes in the education field. Well, another one, take a look at this one. This is the article published in one of the Nature sister journals, and machine learned epidemiology. During the summertime, for example, now, many people worry about food poisons and then, foodborne illness. And here, so that, local governments actually go and visit, restaurants and check the inspections, right? And then they try to check the kitchen, and for example. And so if you make inspections in a traditional way, go by one based on your experiences, and then the study actually found 1 out of 4 they found unsafe. And then the other case is that they used the machine learned epidemiology, the program they call Finder, which is foodborne illness detector in real time. And then they actually machine learned of different information like location, how many people go, which restaurants, and then some of the comments from the people who visited particular restaurants, like, well, the restaurant is dirty, or, I got some stomach ache and things like that. So anyway, if they use the Finder, and then there's some warning and flagged inspection, and then they found 1 out of 2 they found unsafe. So that if you compare to traditional way inspection, 1 out of 4, 25% unsafe, and then Finder program, 50% unsafe. So that the efficiency, administrative efficiency, is basically raised by 100%. So which way we should do in future? It's very clear. And also the other one is it's a very common these days. Some of the X-rays and chest X-ray, for example, reading through the AI-based, machine learned, AI-based systems. And this is the article published by MIT Technology Review. And the case in China, the lack of radiologists. And actually they use the AI-based system, and they try to read in the X-rays so that they can reduce lung disease patients. So here there are a lot of applications, public health, and many other cases. Of course, even in policing, we call predictive policing, so that it's very clear, where when you have particular crimes, about what time, summertime, particular location, you have a burglary, robbery somewhere, about what time, 7 o'clock, or assault, particular corner, in July and August, 6 o'clock, and then you dispatch patrol. That's a predictive policing based on data analysis. And this is the case, Santa Cruz, California, they could reduce 9% assault, 11% burglary, and then 27% robbery. So that it's really something that we can apply some of the technology, new analytics. In addition to that, there are a lot of chatbot services, like Q&A, and responding to citizens' questions. And chatbot has been introduced. In Seoul, in Korea, we have a Seoul Talk, so that people can ask questions through chatbots and they respond. And policing, patrolling, there are robots being introduced in different countries. And even fire, for example, that's part of the big public services. And they try to fire risk analytics, different buildings, and then fire case information, and then some of the high risk locations, and then new buildings. So basically, the machine learn the systems which really give signals which a building is high risk, so that the public service and firefighters office, they can respond in a very effective and efficient way. And even delivery services, postal services. In Korea, we have a lot of islands, and then Indonesia, for example, in the Philippines. In future, we can use drone to parcel delivery, for example. Well, to do that, government cannot do it by itself. There are a lot of services, there are a lot of opportunities, but government, different agencies, we should work together and share information and then collaborate together. Because government is, by nature, it's silo-like. We all know that. How we have them work together. Well, now I just show you two gentlemen here. Please pick just one of two and then stare at him for 5 seconds for me. I'll count 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who is he? Well, it's not Obama. It's not Bush either. This one is fake. 50% Obama, 50% Bush. Well, somebody think this is Obama, and then somebody think this is Bush. They cannot talk. They cannot collaborate. We should accept the other half, and then we can work together within government. And when we work with the citizens, we should be able to understand what citizens want, and then we can work together. That's citizen-centric public services that we want to dream. Well, this is my final slide, and I think I spent 30 minutes almost. Well, this is another quote that I want to share with you. Einstein, once he said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Well, we need balance, some of the problems we have, and then some of the changes we need, and then in some of the limits we have, some of the future vision we have. Well, you and I need to move forward and then try to solve some of the wicked problems like COVID-19. And then future, we provide better, faster, more effective, transparent services to the people together using new technologies. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Moon, for a very informative and very passionate presentation on the topic. We encourage our viewers, so if you have any questions and comments, please do not hesitate to send them here in the chat box for Professor Moon to answer from now on. So, Professor Moon, we have actually already questions in the chat box, but let me start this session with my first question regarding
Okay.
your presentation. You mentioned about the importance of anticipatory and agility of the government to be more prepared, not just about in the present situation, but in looking into the future. So my first question is that also reflects to your institute is how do we institutionalize and strengthen the anticipatory capability of the public sector or the government in this case?
Well, that's very important question and very challenging question. In fact, I talked a lot about data analytics. So that if we want to do anticipation, and then there are different techniques available out there, scenario based, and then environmental scanning. So they're using a lot of technologies and insights. And so that on the one hand, collecting good quality of data is very, very critical. And then analytical skill that we need. So that, for example, in Korea, what we are doing right now, we actually began to recruit data experts in government. So we have a specific track to recruit data person in each ministry. And also we try to allocate more financial budget for maintaining and collecting and maintaining and managing data. So that one of the key issues in Korea is that how we can really take advantage of data analytics for policy makings, as well as preparing for the data-based economy. So that on the one hand, public services really based on anticipation. On the other hand, not only data for public services, but using that as a way to boost up economy. So, because the size of the data economy will go up in future. So that really bring the national competitiveness in future.
Thank you very much for answering that question. I think that's a very good kind of advice we can give to the government, especially taking example of what you mentioned in Korea. So now let me raise some questions from our viewers. So we have a question here. Let me start the question from Charmaine Distor. So this question is, in using disruptive technologies like AI, how can government agencies know up to what extent can they only use it for their services?
So, Jose, I didn't hear the last part. Could you say again?
In using disruptive technologies like AI, how can government agencies know up to what extent they can use it for their services?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, it's a new one, and then many, developing countries, for example, and some of the challenges, financial challenges, technological challenges, and then human resource challenges in introducing AI-based public services. Even in Korea, it's a sort of a new stage, but I think it's very important because the AI-based technology, there are different options available. For example, chat box is a very primary, and now government particularly try to identify some of the key public service area, particularly in communicating with the citizens. And I think that's the something that any government can try initially, and then as you have more data available and and then financial resources available, and then they can expand. So that there are some cases available. Some of the cases I shared in my presentations, and I think in government need to be very sensitive to some of the changing and new options. So the government official need to be sensitive to what they can do within their limit and resources, but we should envision some of the new directions for future because technology is fast changing very fast.
Our viewer has a follow-up question, but before I will go back to other questions, let me ask this question from our friend from Malaysia, Sir Malok. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Moon. Very enlightening and insightful. How do we prepare the public sector human capital to rise to the needs of the future public services? I think this is a very interesting question when we look at the human capital, especially
Right.
at on the side of the government. So
Right.
could you please answer this question?
Right. Human capital is very critical. As you know, Korea is lacking of natural resources, so that we have relied on human capital for economic and social development in many ways. So the human capital is always key. So that I think my answer to the question is depending on the education system in different countries. When the education system is well established, and then the country can rely on education institutions. But the government need to pay special attention to promote human capitals in particular field. For example, we are very lacking of AI human resources. We didn't have good education programs to train AI, so that government decided 2 years ago they put some big educational grant to universities, and then so they received education proposals, and then they offer some financial support to establish AI graduate programs. So that in fact, the Yonsei University, where I am in, received the grant last year, so that we will start new AI graduate programs. So if government has good target and then allocate the resources for that direction is very, very critical, which is related to the point I made, resource fluidity. But the priority issue is really important. So the government needs to make a priority and then allocate resources in a very flexible and strategic way. And the other one is working with industries and then international communities, very, very critical. For example, in 1970s, late 1960s and 70s, Korea was very poor, of course. When we didn't have good personnel in science and technology, what we did was when we received ODA assistance from US, for example, and then we used the ODA money, particular money, to establish Korean Institute of Science and Technology. That ODA assistance really lay big foundation for Korean science and technology. At the time, university quality wasn't good, so that government used the ODA money to establish Korea Institute of Science Technology to train some of the science tech person, at the same time inviting people from outside. So that's the one. And then another one is recruitment in public sector. And the example that I gave you, we actually target data skill people for recruitment, so that we have special track for recruitment for those people. So it's about the target, strategy, allocating resources, and I think that that sort of alignment applies to many cases.
Thank you very much for that question. Looks like your government or Korean education, for example, is preparing for this shift of skills requirement in the future. With your example, like making people more equipped with the advancement of technology. So, sir, we have a question here, and a question I would like to acknowledge from our friend from Africa, the director
Okay.
of the NPCC Mauritius. And he has question to you, and the question is, how do we deal with the unions who are against replacing people by technology? And I think your slides earlier mentioned about those jobs that will be replaced, but how do we handle them, and how do unions, for example,
Right. That's very
this
critical
kind of job?
question. So, union in the public sector and then private sector might be different. And well, private sector, you know, automation replacing jobs. That's very, very critical. We know that a lot of jobs will be gradually, reduced, and the government needs, and then the company should be able to make a strategic plan for that. And the problem is, public sector, because public sector cannot lay people off. Job security is guaranteed by law in many countries. So when I visited Copenhagen, and then when I interviewed the director who is in charge of RPA, which is robot-based automation, and they tried to apply the automation system for social security issues, so that the application of social welfare and then payment. So they try to automate the procedures. And then I asked question, so that what percentage of the whole work is automated? And then the answer was 15%. And then my immediate following question was, so that how did you do with 15% who are replaced by automation? Do you lay them off? That was my question. And then the answer was, no, they cannot, right? So what they did was, so they trained some of them and then gave another jobs. So that because of the public employment, government should be able to prepare very long-term human resource plan. In fact, 2019, so that in 2 years ago, I did a research report to Korean government and actually analyze which department, ministries, and their number of jobs there, and then what percentage of jobs will be replaced and when. So I got estimation, and then that really gives the idea how government should be able to prepare for long-term human resource supply and demand. So I think that's very, very critical. And of course, the labor union is very, very sensitive to that. So I think the job training and education training program in the public sector in government is very, very critical. But private sector, I think there are a lot of coordination necessary between government as a labor policy and social welfare policy, and the company private sectors, their competitiveness decisions.
Thank you very much for your very comprehensive answer. So I'd like to move on to our next question. So we have a question here from the name Patrick John Reyes. And the question is specific for the delivery of social services. Human interaction is considered vital. How do we respond to the issue on ethics and morality, which seem to be absent or hard to incorporate in AI, for example?
That's really true. In fact, in one of the projects we are doing in my institute is ethical frameworks of AI, and there are a lot of ethical principles and frameworks proposed by not only private companies like Google and Microsoft, but also international organizations and individual countries. And there are a lot of transparency issues, explainability issues. So there are ethical issues, of course, so that government, and somehow the ethical issues should be taken care of. And a lot of problems we have seen so far, AI-based systems. For example, the recognition system, which was developed by Amazon years ago, and then that's facial recognition systems. And then when they try to match with U.S. Congress members, lawmakers, Congress members and senators, I believe, senators, and then 26 of the lawmakers in the U.S. matched with criminals because the machine learning through the mugshots, so what this means is that there is the very significant bias against the particular race groups. So ethical issues very, very critical. And I think that's ongoing issues that we need to pay special attention. That's why I said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. So that because of, we know the concerns, right? But that because of the concerns, we cannot stop. I think there are a lot of prospects as well, so that we keep moving, but we should be able to balance of the risk that we are facing with, and then benefits that we are going to have.
Thank you, sir. I think there is a follow-up question to what you have just explained. So this is a question of Leslie Rendon. Isn't the replacement percentage of robot alarming in the field of professionals, specifically pertaining to intelligence?
Well, I think so. The privacy issues, information, that's very, very critical. So that whenever we have, whenever we deal with this type of issues, the key is privacy, and then the ownership of personal data. In fact, that's really a big issue in Korea these days. How you really preserve ownership of my personal data, so that I don't want my data or something, my medical record used by somebody else, so that whenever people, company or some service use my data, of course, my identification will be eliminated, but still, they should get my permit and agreement. So that there are some privacy issues and data ownership issues that will be big challenge in future. And I don't think there's one particular right answer, but I know there are a lot of discussions around that topic, and Korea is not exception. And in fact, we are very hot on that topic these days.
Thank you very much, sir. So I think we have many questions, and some questions are very interrelated to each other. But with your explanation just now, so I would like to ask this question from our viewer. The name is Octavia Vijayanti. I am actually wondering about how Korean government encourage the citizens to cooperate in regards to providing reliable data needed to implement better public services. Could you please elaborate?
Well, it's a very difficult issues, and let me probably I can give one example. Number of years ago, when the city of Seoul tried to respond to citizens' demand for public transportation at nighttime, before COVID-19. Nightlife is very active in Korea, so that after even midnight, Friday, Saturday, a lot of young people still around the street, so that they want to have a public transportation because they don't want to take a taxi. They want to take public transportation because that's easy. So that because of that demand, and City of Seoul tried to provide public transportation at night, we call owl bus. But the problem they faced was, what should be good location for bus stops? It's difficult to decide which bus stop should be a good one. And then to get that location decisions, you should know the places where you have a lot of people at night. So government decided to use the telecommunication company data, because using the mobile phone traffic data, and then you can identify where people are. so that they contacted a private mobile company and then ask the data, of course, eliminating identification information for public services purposes. So it's very important to make a good collaboration, win-win collaboration for public interest. It's very, very critical. Of course, one condition met should be, well, privacy should be protected. But collaboration is very, very critical. So that's why, my last pages in my presentations, I try to emphasize the significance of collaboration among different agencies, between government and citizens and private companies.
Sir, thank you very much. I think your explanation brought us the kind of understanding on countries are quite advanced in digital technology adoption, as an example. But because the follow-up question is very interesting, actually, will digital revolution make the digital divide between the first and third world countries? So I think the viewer divide us into two. One is first, another one is third world countries. Wider or narrow it?
Well, I think, if without any additional actions taken, I think it'll be wider. So that's why the international communities should work together. And one of the projects I was involved was in AI for social goods. And there are a lot of, the efforts made by international organizations and some of the donor countries. They try to help some of the developing countries. For example, the AI-based, machine learning-based system to develop new crop seeds for enhancing the agricultural productivity. So that there are some social good AI for social good activities. Another example would be they try to use the satellite images and see some of the agricultural disease, and they try to identify and take an action to deal with the disease on crop disease, for example. So there are some efforts made for AI for social good, but I think those activities are still very minimal and marginal at this point. So that's why I think as we advance the new technologies, and on the other hand, there should be good collaboration among developed and developing countries, and then international organizations working together, making AI new technology for social good. Unless we take the right actions for that, I think the gap will be wider. So that's why we need action for sustainable development.
Thank you very much, sir. So that also leads me to my question, if there will be a divide. So did the pandemic, we go back to your presentation, force many governments to digitalize services quickly? And if so, are citizens prepared for this?
Yeah, I think yes. As going through the pandemic, we know that citizens' role is very, very critical. Social distancing, we call non-pharmaceutical interventions, MPI. Wearing masks, washing your hands, and social distancing. So MPI is very, very critical and as important as government actions. So that I think a communitarian citizenship is very, very important. I think that's the case in future too. So particularly wicked problems, unless there's a good participation, voluntary participation of citizens, it's very, very difficult to solve. So that co-production is critical, and that will be a good foundation for future.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me ask another question from our viewer. The name is Fajar Hudianto. What regulations should the government make regarding AI? If you have any idea on this, considering one of the AI issues is the presence of unverified AI developers. This is his views. So, any comment to this question?
Well, I actually produced one report. The regulating AI it seems to me there are two stages. One is modernizing stage, where you really try to modelize AI, so that try to voluntary ethical frameworks, ethical principles to designers and deployers and then users. And then second stage is a regulating stage after a modernizing stage. And it has legal implications. Of course, the AI developers' perspective, regulation really they argue, well, that really stifle the whole industry, so that there is always tension, because of the risk side and then benefit side. I think there one typical example would be some of the regulation on drone, and then some of the regulation on some of the auto driving vehicles, and safety issues, and then who should be responsible if there's some problem happens. So there are a lot of legal implications should be discussed, and I think this very early stage. But I know there are a number of countries actually have taken some initiatives. But at this point, still we are in the moralizing stage. On the other hand, one thing that I can tell you is that just like whenever you build big buildings, or big roads, construction projects, you have environmental impact studies, so that basically how new buildings or new airport will affect environment, so that's an environmental impact analysis. And probably in future, probably AI impact analysis, how new AI affect human beings safety, or whatever. So that, and probably that might be something that we need to think about in future.
Thank you very much, sir. I think you have a very good answer to that, because when I was reading the next comment, question from our viewer, it highly relates to what you have just explained. So let me ask this question from Golden Amaa. So when
Okay.
using robots and humans, does that increase the budget or cost for the government? And this means that it may only be suitable for rich countries, maybe like the case of Korea, based on your example. So what's your comment to this question, sir?
Well, I think there are different approaches should be considered. For example, some developed countries, if there are big, job replacement by automation or robots, and then some of the people argue for robot tax, so that actually they tax on robots and automation systems, and then with that tax, and they can support the people who might lose jobs, so that there are some systems should be developed in country. And then the developing country, and there are some jobs will be removed. And I think in future, for example, the first industry, agriculture, for example, and that will possibly will be very good value added industry. So that I think developing countries need to think about how they preserve the nature, and then some of the first industry as a way to enhance the value, because what we believe valuable now might be very different you know in 5 years or 10 years later. Think about climate change, and then nature will be very important value. But many developing countries now destroy some of the natural assets. So the future value should be considered some of the planning projects these days. So I think that's something that we need to think about for developing countries. And again, going back to the south and south north collaboration and south south collaboration would be very, very important. International collaboration.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Let me ask some of my questions. I think especially when this COVID-19 happened last year and things have changed dramatically. So one of the issues that I would like to, or questions I'd like to ask you is that how do we address the issue of lack of skills or access to digital services among citizens? So
Well,
far we talk about people have access, but in reality, there are people who don't have access and they don't have the skills or the technology to avail public services. So how do we
right.
address that kind of problem?
Well, I think there is a short-term solution and then long-term solution. Short-term solution will be, there are more, programs, which support some of the people who are underprivileged, so that you know, so that try to solve the digital divide issues. For example, my father, he is over 80 years old, and then he attended, not now not attending. He attended some of the computer class, free, provided by the local government center, and learn how to do internet surfing, and then even Photoshop, emailing, and things. So that there are some programs which really try to overcome digital divide, and I think there are more subtle and comprehensive programs for particular target populations to solve the digital divide. On the other hand, a long-term solution would be, I think, it's getting more convenient and easier to use digital device, and then some of the young people now, they are more keen at using digital devices. Of course, there are different devices out there, but they are very different from old generations because they are digital generations. So long term, it's getting easier, and then more devices available. In that regard, I think the gap between the developed and developing countries will be reduced in terms of the that skill and aspects.
Thank you, sir. So that brought me to my last question, but I believe you already have answered this, but let me just ask this. So will the future of public services be all about the adoption of digital technology? Then everyone should be learning all these things because that's how we avail public services in the future.
Well, I think there's. I hope that I don't know how many people now in this P talk, and I think we should be aware of the prospect of new technologies. But as a government officials, and probably many of you are, need to pay attention to some of the risk, and try to really balance between the two. But government is the DNA in government is not really oriented for changing. So I hope that we all geared toward more receptive to new technologies and try to see some of the values and prospects that can help to provide better service in the future so that we can actually move together for better directions.
Thank you very much, Professor Moon, for your answer. And basically, thank you very much for your presentation and answering the questions. So to our dear viewers, so we have come to an end part of this P-Talk. So let me conclude the discussion today based on the presentation and the questions and answers. We can conclude that future public services will be highly influenced by the role of the digital tools in delivering more efficient, intelligent, and citizen-centric public services. And we have many examples on how such technologies are shaping the direction of public services in the future. We are indeed in an unstoppable path toward digital revolution, but concerns about fairness and access remain, with the impact of COVID-19 influencing and changing on how services will be provided. It also affects citizen satisfaction, especially on the quality of life in the future. And we hope that through this P-Talk, we are able to shed light on the topic and provide some evidence-based discussion with examples from the presentation of Professor Moon. We hope you find this session insightful and useful, especially for the public sector in reimagining future public services. So with that, we would like to sincerely thank again Professor Moon and invite him for his final message.
Well, thank you for having me today. And I just want to say, well, I talked about future, future, there are different kinds of future that we know, like the population, and future we don't know, and that's uncertainty. And then there's a future that we can make together. And today I just want to emphasize again the future we can make together with the action taken by government and citizens together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Moon. That brought me to your last slide about riding a bicycle. We keep on moving for our future. So thank you very much, Professor Moon. And we would like to thank our viewers for watching this program. And we invite you again to our series of productivity talk. Please stay tuned with our next P-Talk session. And thank you very much for joining us today. Please stay safe and healthy wherever you are. Thank you again, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.